Welcome everybody to the 27th November 23 meeting of Civil Defence Emergency Management Group. I'm being informed we do have a quorum, and I'm pleased to declare the meeting open. And we'll open the meeting with Mihi Whakato Karakia. Whakato te hau, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina, ki uta, kia mātara kara ki tai, Mihi aki ana tiaka ata kura, I sho, I hoka, I ho hu, te hei Māori ora. Thank you. And we have a supplementary agenda item for the meeting, which has been distributed, called Supplementary Agenda. You should all have one. That'll be presented after item 8.9. Apologies, and I have apologies from Phil Major and Nigel Bowen for lateness. Sam Broughton's online, but will join in person shortly. And also we have online is Craig Rowley and Munro. Other apologies I have is Stuart Duncan, Leah McKenzie, James Stewart, who and Rob Orchard will be standing in. Welcome, Rob. Leanne Watson and Will Doherty. Conflicts of interest. Is there any conflicts of interest in today's agenda? No. Public petitions, deputations and petitions. None that I'm aware of. No. Extraordinary business and urgent business. None. Cool. Notice of motion. None. Cool. Next, we're on to the minutes. And we have the minutes on page 10 of the agenda. Are there any matters of accuracy relating to the minutes of that date of the last meeting? Those pages. We're through to page 10, page 20 rather. If there's not, so I'd like to confirm that the minutes of the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group joint meeting held on the 24th of August 2023. Confirm them. Dan, John, all in favour, please aye. Carried. Thank you. Item number 8, page 21. And the Civil Defence Management Group Joint Committee Resolution Status Report, November 23. Status report.
Just report that post all status, all items have been completed apart from on page 30. There is the learnings from the severe weather event at the beginning of this year. I'll just report that at this stage we are implementing a lessons learnt database so that we can actually capture all of our lessons that we've learnt since the 2016 Kaikoura Huranui earthquake. So it'll be in one place. These will go into there, and at that time I'll then come back to you. So hopefully the next meeting with how we're going to achieve these things.
Any questions, John?
Very good, Mr. Chair. Has there been any further conversation about a national kind of lessons learned database, given the enormity of the number of events?
Through the chair, yes, NEMA is looking at a lessons learnt, actually a whole lessons learnt system. They're looking to adopt the system that Australia is currently using, and I sit on the working group for that. Now we've only met once, and that was earlier in the year, but going forward we'll see more meetings and an adoption of that modified Australian program to be used here, and that will include a database.
Just to follow up, so what we're doing would be reasonably compatible with what might come into play on a national basis.
Yeah, I'd see it feeding into it. Yeah, I think the national one will probably look at national reviews, but won't pick up necessarily the stuff that sits in our local group reviews.
Further questions, Murray?
Tricky. Oh, if I may, so the lessons learnt document that you speak of, is it likely to drill down into specific types of events, you know, a flooding event and how that might differ from an earthquake event that might differ from a wildfire? You know, will it have a sort of drilled down into sections so that it would be easy to access that information under stress? Or
Sure. I don't think it will necessarily drill down into event by event, but what it will do is it will start to categorise things that are similar.
Yeah.
And as we all know, it's often not lessons learnt, it's lessons relearnt. And we want to get past that. And so the database will have, you know, just as an example, some form of training needs to be delivered. If that's come through 10 times through previous events, then we know that that's something we should be working on. So not by event type, but by learning type.
Further questions of James? I would like to move that the status of the previous. Here we go. Note the status of the previous resolutions provided in the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee Resolution Status Report November 2023. Murray and John. All in favour, please say aye. Very, thank you. Item 8.2, page 34. Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Review. And James.
Right, thank you. So you'll all be aware of the group review that we've been doing. I've added a little bit more background to this that hasn't necessarily been through a lot of the other conversations. We all know that the group office has undergone its review, and it's the 4th time there's been a review of this nature in the last 11 years. And then paragraph 3 goes through those reviews that we've had, and I'm more than welcome to share those with anyone who hasn't seen them or wants to have them refreshed again. So the report in particular was had the coordinating executive group and the joint committee in an informal meeting on the 21st of September had a look at it, and there was quite a bit of feedback around the fact that some mayors and some chief executives were not able to attend those meetings, and 3 councils in particular provided feedback, further feedback on that. So Waimakariri, Christchurch City Council and Selwyn District Councils all provided extra feedback. The report starts by sort of talking about the drivers. So you'll see that we've got climate change, the need to carry out effective risk management, provide effective response and recovery from emergencies, and to have a focus of people at the centre of what we do. And the discussion then sort of broke into 5 themes that KPMG explored, being governance, funding, planning and partnerships and prioritisation, people and critical enablers. So they're all in the review there for you to see. And then it puts forward 5 structural operating models, these being a centralisation or a regionalisation, a hybrid, or probably preferring to call that an enhanced group office, local clusters, regionalisation in clusters, and then we added in the status quo. I think unfortunately in the report that's still called option 0, but for clarity I've called that option 5 in the paper here. There's no, I mean, in this report there's no recommendation as to which way to go. I think there's more work to do, but we can discuss that shortly. There's then some strategic recommendations around 4 sort of key projects that we've got to have a think about in the future, as well as we're finishing with 4 high-level steps that the Joint Committee should explore over the next 12 months. So that's around obtaining agreement from governance on which of those structural and strategic recommendations to implement. Where appropriate, develop detailed designs, frameworks to inform the implementation, including the FTE requirements. Develop and obtain governance approval for an agreed transition, including timeframes, accountabilities, costings, key performance indicators, and so forth. And then develop an implementation plan to carry out those changes. Point 13 there, just due to the fact that we're all going through long-term planning at the moment, And while we haven't made a decision as a particular direction to go in, we have made a recommendation of 3.5 positions for the group office to begin to start looking at that group office enhancement. And we'll talk about that. It says in your paper 8.8, it should be 8.3, sorry. Sorry, 8.2. The LTP one's 8.3. Yeah. And the reports they're attached, and I'm happy to take any conversation or discussion on it.
Open for discussion now. Welcome, Nigel. Sam.
Yeah.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, I must say I'd like to thank K&G in particular for involving me in particular in discussion. I think we were on for about 2 or 3 hours, but I've looked at all the recommendations in the review, and all of those recommendations was our conversation, and most of them, and I have to say that I was very thrilled to see build strong relationships with iwi, and in particular with mana whenua. But over and above that, I felt that I was well represented in the review itself, and I'm just saying to you, thank you, and thank KMG.
Yeah, it's very important that we consult with everybody. And I think the last meeting with one before, you raised the fact that mana whenua wasn't there, but it wasn't, and contributed well. The sort of chicken and egg this one, because we're looking at putting money into a long-term plan. We haven't decided which way we're going to head. But I think for the workshop we had early on, the hybrid model is sort of where we were thinking, but we've also got the status quo in there now too. So that should evolve over time. So if you're Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased with what's recommended here, and we raised our concerns at that around engagement. So it was pleasing that we were able to put in some further work and that's being considered. I agree with Elizabeth, a very important partner is mana whenua, and very important that has been considered as part of this. And we certainly regard, as far as our council is concerned, Ngāi Tūriri an absolute vital partner in that. But we're supportive of that, noting that there is a budget provision. Thank you, John and Ekan, for bearing that for us. But it's important that at the region, from our perspective, at a regional level, that there is some extra resourcing to provide that support. So if that is the hybrid model, then that's the one that we are certainly supportive of. So thank you.
You further, Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I guess my question is, how do we know in step 12 there's 4 different areas that's kind of recommended? How are we going to know which of those? Like the first one is obtain governance agreement around what structure. Like where does that kind of happen before we get into the develop more approval and then conduct the change management process? It's kind of like there's a bit of an order to some of these. So just wondering, what's the time frame around that, and is that, will that be based purely just on the KPMG recommendations? Like that's the document we're now holding up as this is our future in this document, because there was a bit of discussion around at the Selwyn meeting where people felt like that it didn't really capture where we're at. It just gave us some changes for the future and hadn't necessarily analysed the good things about what we're holding on to. So I just want to make sure in any change management process we're not going to go through and get rid of the things that haven't been identified in the report, but that we all know are really good to continue to have.
In the following pages of the report, I think there's they call it 0, one there, which is the status quo, which wasn't there before. That's been added. But James, you anything further to add? Or
Yeah, to help with that one, Sam, I've called it option 5, which is the status quo. So it was added back in the KPMG report. They've called it option 0, but option 0 doesn't sound particularly good. So it sort of almost was discounting it. So I've left it in as 5. And my thoughts would be that for the next joint committee in KEGS, so January, February next year, that we start to put together some papers that explore these options and draw a recommendation out of them for that sort of structural way forward. and then that will allow us to look at all those other bits, as you said, say, as to which ones we adopt and which ones we don't, and which way we go forward. But structurally, we've got to get it right first.
That'll come to the February meeting.
My intent would be, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I look at the options, I guess I don't want us to get too bound up in which option we're going to, because mine goes, here's a KPMG report. It has given us options, and I see those options as being applicable to different areas. So Nigel and South Canterbury are looking at clustering and working together, whether you call it a cluster or a collaboration, they are working in that space. And so as part of a cluster, Selwyn is well advanced in their thinking. Waimakariri is well advanced in their thinking and processes. Do they want to be part of a cluster? Do they have the ability to provide some assistance? Some others, Ashburton's on the way up in a lift. So for me, I definitely don't want us to be in that centralisation space. There's probably some options for some shared service and an uplift within the office, which is the budget provides for some extra training, some planning and the like, that does provide support to those, I guess, TAs that struggle a little bit with resourcing and staffing to lift everyone a wee bit. So for me, it's not a binary option of where we go. It's a wee bit horses for courses and deciding what's going to work collectively for everyone, and then building the structure to encompass what we want. But the first part is that funding piece to put some more staffing into the office down here, which will provide the opportunity to better resource some of our smaller TAs along the way. That work doesn't require us to put an option in place. It just lifts us up to where we probably need to be. So that's my thinking around what the future looks like, not necessarily an option. Horses for courses for who needs what, and everyone having confidence that groupings or individuals can achieve what they need to achieve for their communities, but collectively for the region. That's kind of how I see it.
Thanks, John. So that would kind of look like option 0 or option 5, the same status quo, with an enhanced regional office and the option to cluster should a group of TAs want to do it. And I think that's probably where we will drive a recommendation out of the report for the next meeting, as long as that was sort of sounding in the right ballpark with all of you.
Further questions for James? If not, there's a recommendation there, and it's in 2 parts. We'll take them together. I think they could go together, unless someone thinks that they stay separate.
May I just ask a question? Sorry, I'm just being thoughtful. When we look at this report in its entirety in the February meeting and looking at those 5 options, and each one of them will have sort of strengths or weaknesses, will we be able to analyse one against the other to try and actually get to a point that perhaps John's describing, where, you know, it may not be any of them, but it may be a little bit of everything that actually will give us the best outcome going forward? Is that what we're likely to see at February, so we can actually get, you know, good comparative data, I guess? Thank you.
Haven't quite got to that point of working out what it's going to look like yet, but yes, it will be something like that.
What would be useful in my mind is if you were talking to a Kaikoura or maybe Waimakariri and going, this is how we see our future, we have the strength to do it ourselves, or we want to get together and have a conversation with Kaikoura or Waimakariri and come up with an option that you can put on the table that then feeds into that February meeting, so that James isn't turning up with a set of ideas that you might or might not like. So I think that collaborative process is the individual TAs or groupings coming up with some ideas or thoughts about how it might work best for them in the wider context. And that's whether that's achievable.
I hope so, John. Yeah. Yeah, I know that there's not a lot of time between now and February, and with Christmas in between, but yes. Then I suppose if any of you would like to have more of that sort of one-on-one conversation with myself, and probably with Richard as our recovery manager as well, more than happy to come and visit you and your chief executive or your controllers. That probably in the new year I'll start booking those anyway, but if you want it sooner, I'm very keen to.
Yeah, that would be good. If the, thinking about if it goes to the keg, we're not the keg, we're the next to it. So any decisions there will be kegs, not this group. So should there be a workshop or something to get our views to get to the final view?
This is our report, and we are governors. I'm just being blunt. Do we sit and go, KEG thinks this, therefore this is what we'll do? And one of the reasons for this report in our name was for us as governors to think about what the future looks like as governors. I'm not being disrespectful to whoever or whatever, but we are the governors.
And I think that raises a really good part of the report, where it's got review how the KEG and the Joint Committee actually operate. Because at the moment the agenda for both is almost identical, which means that we're not probably using them as effectively as we could. I don't quite know how to create that separation, but I think, you know, here in governance there is that final choice on structural matters, and the coordinating executive group are advisors to you, along with myself and the other emergency managers. So it will go to KEG, and there will be a recommendation that will come out of that to support this going forward. I might support that recommendation with the group office recommendations as well, if that's okay.
So you got the recommendation in front of you. So I'd like to move, and I won't read them, but item 8.3 in your agenda should be 8.2. Sorry, 8.2 in the agenda should read 8.3 in the recommendation. Sorry. Dan and Nigel, any further discussion? Put the motion, all in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Next item 8.3 on page 87. Civil Defence Emergency Management Long-Term Plan. James.
Thanks, Neil. So really part two of the previous conversation in a way. As you will all be aware, you know, Environment Canterbury long-term plan holds the regional civil defence budget. And so the draft LCP is yet to be made, but Environment Canterbury have indicated that they're happy to take what I'm presenting to you today to consultation. Just in your point 3 there, exposed expenditure for the 24-25 first year of LTP is 385 million, distributed across group readiness, the Emergency Management Training Centre, and then Lifeline utility coordination. So that's a total increase of $881,000, or a 30% increase from this year's current budget. That's predominantly driven by 4 new full-time equivalent positions. And there's a few other increases to cover inflation and some other specific changes in goods and services. So the impact to the rates is an increase of 731,000 compared to the previous report financial year. Is funded through a UAGC based on 287,000 rating units, and that increase is equivalent to a $2.54 per year per rating district. Just for awareness, in 2023 the actual UAGC was $11.91. The budget for this year for 2024 was $10.29. That was due to the reserve being repaid last year. And so we've got an increase to $12.82 per rating unit with this proposed budget. There's a summary of those changes there. How will it be used? So an FTE specifically to look at EOC and EC training, EOC training and exercising. We've previously reported that that's an area that we've got behind in and need further support in. Another one around public education and community engagement. I see that person working very closely with district council staff and other partner agencies. And an FTE in that readiness and recovery planning space, particularly to look at those high consequence regional hazards like AF8 tsunami, extreme weather events, and there's a bit of interest within our emergency managers on that sort of malicious attack, cyber attack type thing, and getting an understanding of that. And then a part-time position of 0.4 FTE for a project and program coordinator. Be aware of all that work that's been done with the 2021 flood lessons learned. A lot of that's been achieved due to the fact that we've had a program project coordinator. So Rosa sits with us at the moment in a fixed term position, and this would make that a full term position, permanent position, sorry. And we've got budget in here for a shared mana whenua role, which will be jointly funded with Ngāi Tahu. It's in for the next financial year, but it'll depend whether Ngāi Tahu is ready for that. There's a small part of that increases to help with the implementation of that KPMG review if it goes ahead, and an increase in the AF8 funding from 50k to 75k. And it's important to note that these provisions will enable rather than limit future decisions on the KPMG report, and anything that sort of comes out of that we would have to bring into further annual planning processes or future long-term planning processes. And just the last point there, it's proposed that after the first mana whenua position is established, a second one and potentially also a third one over the next 2 or 3 years could be established.
Thank you, James. Questions for James? Nigel?
Yeah, and thanks, Neil, and through you. In regard to FTE to support public education and community engagement, what would be different from what potentially our own staff on the ground are currently doing? I'm just conscious of FTEs for unless they're actually doing something.
One of the key things that Rachel Thornton's our community resilience coordinator has been finding is across our partner agencies and our territorial authorities that while we're approaching public education from a similar lens, the timing and the actual contents are often end up being different. So this would be a role around strengthening what we do by getting more similarities than differences. It's not to say that it's all going to be the same, but getting them closer aligned together. I think also in this position, there's a bit of a desire for more support with our welfare that we do. Once again, not that we're doing it wrong, it's just that some across the TA, some of the plans look very different from each other. So it's about getting strength and aligning them more, so there's more similarity than difference. Hopefully that answers that one for you, Nigel.
John?
Just in conversation with some of the EMOs, we have different TAs that have really good systems and really well staffed that have that community front-facing education space, and we have some that just due to size and sourcing don't. So the opportunity of having a resource within the regional office that can assist in some of those places, it's a bit about the community, supporting the community in a sense. So we need to be very careful that we drill down, thanks Al, into some of those things that are the responsibilities of TAs and go, these are the things the territorial authority should be doing, that's their prerogative, because civil defence starts on the ground, on the riverbank, and the Waimaka area is Selwyn, well up on what they're doing. Others may struggle a little bit in getting that and go, we know what we have to do, but we're struggling a wee bit with the resourcing to do it. So there's an opportunity with the regional office to provide some of that upskilling and assistance. So I think that's what we're seeing in some of the KPMG stuff and talking to some of the EMOs, the assistance that could be provided for those folk that have lesser resourcing.
James?
Yeah, thanks, John. Just on that, I want to include that this wouldn't be about coming and taking over from the work you do, particularly that public engagement. I think that's really important that your local EMOs and your local staff are doing that. So that engagement will still sit with you. However, if you requested them to help, I'd see them helping, in those evenings and weekend-based sessions that you do with the public. But I think it's really important that your own staff do that public-facing component.
Sid? Thank you. Couple of questions. One is the amount that we're putting into the long-term plan, like this is kind of like the first year, and then from then on, is it inflation adjusted through your 10-year plan, or is this going to be something that, like, have we allowed for the other changes that might eventuate through a decision in February, which will be too late for the draft to be changed, and when that goes out?
So it doesn't take into account any of those future changes that we might agree to. However, we can do address those through the annual planning process. So yeah, any significant change is not going to happen in the next financial year at this stage.
Okay, and I can see that there's some good things about having consistency for training, so that there's level to that, and the comms to the community again, because everyone travels around. It's nice to see the same sorts of things in different places. But I feel like one of the things that I'm often felt feedback from my councillors is whose responsibility is it to be doing a certain thing. It often comes up between ECAN and ourselves around biodiversity, or pick something and no one's quite clear, should this be us, or should it be ECAN, or should it be joint, or should it be wherever? So I just want to make sure that when we're approving this budget and we're saying, yeah, we want group to do more, like, where are we drawing the lines around? I mean, should we be asking group to do more in this case, or should we be asking ourselves to do more and step up, or should we all be giving it to group to do more of, or like, where's that conversation at, or has that been had?
To me, that's a conversation that we now need to have, given the options that sit in front of us. So back again to each TA going, these are the things that by statutory requirement we have to do, and we can get 90% of it. We would like some assistance. Here's the stuff we need to do. We can only probably do 50%. We would like some assistance. So almost sitting down TA by TA and working out the responsibility, in my mind, still sits with you, because you are in the community, you are front facing, you are doing it, but there may well be those things that you just cannot achieve because of size or whatever. So it's providing assistance to you to achieve the absolutes and the needs, but we haven't had that conversation. So I think that's something that we do need to do, is sit down and go, this isn't about taking up.
Yeah, so is that going to be February? Like, how do we sort that out? Because I think it's a really important thing for us to actually know where we're going, because it is going to affect our budgets, and other things as well internally for our councils, as we said, our 10-year plans.
I don't think we'll have that ready by February. I think there's a few moving parts that we need to kind of get some alignment on first. And I was talking to John and Al before we started the meeting. So currently there is no group work program. There's a group office one. Each of our TAs has its own program, and we haven't actually locked it, putting those together and saying where is there alignment and where there isn't alignment. But that's one of the pieces of work that Rose is currently doing for us, trying to get that understanding. Once we've got that understanding, and because we're going through LTP processes now, we can't make instant changes tomorrow or next year, but we can begin to start aligning in year 2 of the LTP, and perhaps by the end we get to end of year 3, we might be more fully aligned. But I don't think I certainly wouldn't want to try and create alignment in all the work we're doing across all 9 TAs and Environment Canterbury in 1 year. I think we would struggle to achieve that. So I see it being an iterative process, Sam, where we build on it and increase it and start getting that alignment as we want over the next 2 to 3 years of this current LTP. That's how I see it.
Little steps to get there.
Yeah.
James, at the moment you've got 13 full-time equivalents at the building down the road. Could you possibly send us a flow chart of where everyone sits, the hierarchy, or the everyone sort of fits in there at the moment? for the group or whoever wants it. And useful for our councils as well for what where they need to go to whatever person.
Yep, I can certainly send out a structural diagram of the office at the moment, and I'll include all the contact details so that, you know, if you needed to make contact with any of those people, you'd be most welcome to.
There's a recommendation there in front of us. If there's no more questions.
Sorry, I struggle with get stuck on the FTE, especially at budget time, because it's in there forever and a day. And conscious that, you know, this isn't only $2.50 for all that weekend we're considering as far as rate rise. So where did that start to before it got down to 4? Did it start at 6 or 7? What was the wish list before you got to 4, or is it at 4 some of the healthy theory that give a little bit less than is asked for and you'll prioritise? And also I do struggle with the fact that we don't give enough. I don't like the fact that we do an LTP every 3 years, but then obviously, and this is no disrespect, it's sort of built into our way of thinking, but then everyone wants to change it a year later. I'd love to see everything in there now. It was really frustrating as far as a governor. So I tell my team, please don't come back in a year's time as much as possible for additional staff. We need to know now. That's the point of a 10-year plan.
Yeah, I think unfortunate that the LTPs happened at the same time as the KPMG's reports come out without us actually really being able to consider it as well as would have been desirable. The figures that I put into here in the request to Environment Cannery was for the 3 FTEs plus that part-time position. That's all I went for. I didn't go for any more, you know, based on the fact that we've got to have this more wholesome conversation around FTEs and other roles that the group office has. So, you know, if there's any adoption of bigger substantive changes following the KPMG review, they will unfortunately have to go through that annual planning process.
So would that lead to having an extra 4 resources in civil defence here in Christchurch? Our locals wouldn't need to ramp anything up at all. They could call upon a group to fulfil their extra needs if they had any.
Yeah,
doing our budgets at our place.
Yeah, across those topics that we're talking about, you know, and I suppose it's really important to note that within, say, for example, that training one, there'd still be an expectation that your emergency managers are helping in that training delivery. It's just that I'll have a full-time person who's able to come and assist with that, prepare materials, run exercises. So Bronwyn Sutton's my training coordinator at the moment. Amongst all the other things that she has to do, she's just finding she's not getting the time. And Janelle Mackey, her predecessor, couldn't get the time to do that to the demand that your EMOs had. So that's probably the most key position of all these ones.
Going forward, I mean, I agree with the comments that Nigel has made around the cost implications and referring back to the KPMG report and, you know, the proposal for change. I totally support what Nigel said. Do you think that that for a small TA like ourselves to be able to access some of that intel within group, that will be freely available to our district so that we, you know, get the resource that we need to support, I guess, what John's been alluding to, small councils. Yeah. And so I guess I just need to have the confidence that with the three and a half year positions, that actually that resourcing is going to support our networks.
My intent is certainly that they do. I can see that trainer, you know, 50%, 80% of their time, somewhere in between there, delivering training in your councils. The public education position, once again, out supporting you, spending time in your offices, not stuck in the regional office. The planner might spend a bit more time in our office, but, you know, through this current year, because of the significant planning that we've got to do. But after that, I'd like to see them going and sitting in with your EMOs and creating that alignment between all our plans. So one of the just on that, one of the other KPMG recommendations was to get a good understanding of where we're all at with planning, put a traffic light system against it, and then look at getting better alignment between our different plans. So, our hazard plans, our recovery plans, reduction, etc. That planner could go and actually help support driving that consistency between us.
I acknowledge Nigel's concerns that there's only $2.54 rating unit over Canterbury, which is half a cup of coffee. But it is a 30% increase. When you look at it, depends how you deliver the message. Yeah, but I take your concerns on board. Ben.
Nigel's absolutely right, and Murray, it'll go out as and be highlighted in the consultation. Obviously, coming back, it's going to be a tough year for all of us next year with LTPs. One council the other day was indicating where the ears might be the other night at meal forum dinner, which was eye-watering. So we're all in that position, but I think it's important that we do go out with it because there are clearly some I recommend ECAM that they do, because there are some councils that certainly could do with that support. So I'm supportive of it going out for consultation. And then obviously there'll be a call for ECAM to make based on the feedback.
Thank you for that support, Dan, and absolutely recognise the challenges. I was just looking at an audit and risk presentation by John Nichols and others out of Central Hawke's Bay, and the challenges of climate change. And I think we all recognise, sitting up there, they're going, if we'd only looked at the worst case scenario and had a bit more planning or a bit more insight into what might have been, things may not have been significantly different, but we would have been in a better place. And if we look at the risk of climate change, a whole bunch of things, I think it is incumbent on us to get as much of our planning and understanding in place as we can, recognising the risk to all of us in our councils along the way as climate change and some of these events start to impact further. So we need to be there and getting that planning and understanding in place. Otherwise, we generally do risk our communities.
Thanks, John. So I've got the recommendation here. Then the Joint Committee endorses the proposed CDM component of the Environment Canterbury's draft 24-25 long-term plan budget, noting a substantial component of the budget increases are linked to the implementation of the KPMG review of the CDM group. So we'd like to move. Nigel, Sam, further discussion? Put the motion all in favour, please say aye. It's carried. 8.4 and National Emergency Management Agency report. Rochelle, welcome. Take us through your report.
Yeah, that's the right one. Kia ora tātou, nice to see you all. And I will take the report as read and just speak to a couple of the updates in it. So at the time of printing this report, I would like to update. Oh, actually, I might have printed the wrong last in front of me. I do apologise. But does it mention Wendy Wright? I don't think so. Yeah, sorry, it is the same report I am looking at. So Wendy Wright has been appointed as our new National Controller. At the time of writing this report, that was not put in there. So Roger Ball, who you had met previously, has moved on from NEMA. So Wendy has been appointed into that role, and we have had a bit of a change, as our national controllers have moved on. So really looking forward to working with her, and at some point in time, you may get to meet her. We do have our national exercise Ruwhenua happening next year. So the Canterbury Group Office, along with your emergency management officers, are all actively involved in planning for that. So at some point in time, I am sure that you will be looped in to that exercise happening across 3 days with an AF8 scenario. I've added in there the annual readiness training for 2023, and really we put that there to say thank you. Many of you released your staff would be able to attend such trainings and opportunities, and we couldn't do it without the support of the TAs, and are always very, very grateful for that. So thank you. Currently, we do not have any update on the bill. Obviously, the new government has now come in, so we will keep you informed as updates come about on that. And the after action review, so the NEMA internal review, we're expecting that sort of to come out in December and then the inquiry to the severe weather event that was separate. The external inquiry, March is my understanding that that would become public. So I haven't actually had a further update on where things were at that. My understanding was a draft was meant to be going to the Minister in December, then for public release in March. So as that comes to hand, we will again share that. And then finally, we do have a new Minister for Emergency Management and Recovery, Minister Mark Mitchell. I'm sure many of you are across that update. And I think just to add the importance and emphasis they have put on recovery right now and separating it out. We don't really know what that means as yet, and especially beyond the current cyclone recovery unit. But again, as things evolve, I'm sure we will start to understand that better. From a NEMA perspective, our executive leadership team are very busy with the new minister landing and with briefings and the rest, and also wondering, you know, given his other portfolios of corrections and police, we'll wait and see like sort of what that means for these portfolios. Given I guess Chair McAnulty had local government as well, so now obviously they've separated out. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out in due course. And my understanding is they are being sworn in today. So yeah. Oh, been sworn in then. I'm behind. You're across this. Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But that's it.
Michelle, any questions of Michelle? Doesn't look like it. Michelle, thanks for the funding that NEMA gave us for resilience funding. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, thank you. No questions. Well done. Thanks. Recommendation there to receive the National Emergency Management Agency update. So I'd like to move. Mary, Nigel. Any discussion? Put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. 8.5, Lifeline Utilities update on page 94. Mark Gordon to present.
Once we get that going, thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe I'm going to be running this. Could be a little bit dangerous because I might cut people off, but I hope not. Oh, look at that, marvellous. Isn't it great to have good health? Yeah. No, just in kind of starting, I think it's probably been a little while since we presented on the Resilience Fund project that we'd started and is now complete. So it's more than timely, if you like, that we come and talk to you about what we did and also the next two phases of work that we're engaged in. And I certainly reiterate your thanks to NEMA for supporting this work because we think it's good work to be doing. And I might add that the New Zealand Lifelines Council has also kind of emphasised the need to do more of this kind of resilience business case, program business case work that we're doing here or trying to do, because it brings all of the different lifelines together in a collaborative way, and you're looking at the interdependent effects of a whole system of systems. So with that, I think we're good to move on. Let's just see, page down. Yep. So can you see that okay up there? Where this project began a couple of years ago was seeking to move towards what Wellington had done with a comprehensive program business case, looking at all of the different interventions that agencies could take if there was a major Wellington earthquake event. And some of those interventions were standard asset management. Let's bring some renewals work. Some of it was new, like strengthening, putting a new road in or strengthening a pipeline to the port. And what I wanted to do back then was to say, can we get a Lifelines GIS portal and bring in the science and then marry that up with some models across the top, which start to bring in, the GIS, the visualization of your hazard events, bringing in your infrastructure layers, where does the asset intersect with the hazard, and then actually run some economic analysis across that so we can actually look at what's the impact on GDP, the economic impact of events in terms of the disruption that we're seeing. So that's what we've got up on the top there. So that's what we were trying to do, is to set up a process. We looked at North Canterbury. For that, a number of Lifeline sectors in North Canterbury there. And just basically defined in that list there a maturity pathway which said, look, there's about 12 or 13, 11, in fact, steps, different things that we could do that would actually sort of build our maturity in doing this kind of resilience work. And that goes right down to the bottom of the business case development. But it starts at the top with having a good understanding of your assets, of your infrastructure, and then building up the storyline from there. So that was the proof of concept, and we did that. We got our lifelines into the GIS portal. That's just an example. We got some hazards into the portal. That's a 500-year flood event from ECAN flooding people for Kaikoura. We did the same for Amakariri, the district there, and you can sort of see in the dark blue the potential for some significant flooding in the lower reaches of the Ashley and into the Kaipoi kind of area, and also further north up above Amberley, towards Amberley anyway, there, Saltwater Creek, I think that is. So we're sort of starting to see, well, what does that mean in terms of the effect on infrastructure? Here is where we partnered with Urban Intelligence. I think some of you are familiar with Urban Intelligence and the visualization tool that they bring through their GIS. We supply them the data, and they bring that visualization, and they apply what we call a fragility relationship. So in other words, if a substation, electricity substation, for example, is flooded by more than a certain degree, it becomes inoperable. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of an outage? So there we can see the impact on roads. The next one is the impact on substations, and there's some, if I can get my mouse, no, it's not going to work on this, but you can see in that bottom right, in Kaipoi, there's actually a splash of orange on a substation down there. So we know that there's quite a significant impact to the electricity sector in that town. So we get that, and we've got that across water, wastewater, electricity, telecommunications, roads in North Canterbury. So the next step then was to say, well, okay, let's bring the merits tool in, the market economics tool, to see, let's run the ruler over it and see what the impact on our GDP impact might be. And the way that that works is that we have statistical areas, so that there's 483 in North Canterbury, and we look at each of the services that we're thinking about. Is it working? Is it not working? How long is it going to take to recover that service? Therefore, we can actually then work out what the economic impact might be. So we did a few things. We broke a few things. I broke the Ashley River Bridge because I like breaking bridges. And we assumed that would be out for 3 weeks. We said any kind of road that's got medium to high flooding, which is sort of the orange colour, will be out for 3 days. Substations, 5 days, again, if it's that orangey, reddy colour, and telcos and 3 waters. So we sort of set up some thresholds to say what would the outage be, and therefore what is the economic impact likely to be. And these are things that you can spend a lot more time. We spend time with the utilities, but you can actually look at that in quite a lot of detail and become quite granular. We didn't get too deep into that. But nonetheless, what we found in using the merit model, and this is looking at kind of business behaviours, there's a transport element in it as well. There's a couple of things that haven't been done yet that we'd like to do. One of those is farm impact on farming. And there's also an environmental module that's coming as well. So there's more to come in the merit space. But what it shows you is the dip in your GDP. The bottom diagram there, you can see that kind of dip. And the right-hand diagram is for Canterbury. And it's basically looking at all of the different industries that are operating in North Canterbury and the degree to which that they are impacted by those various outages. And then you run an economic across that. And I think that the overall impact on GDP was something like 390 million. So we got a number out of it that said that's the economic impact. What you've assumed in terms of those outages is going to lead to an economic impact of that. That does not include, the damage to private property. It doesn't include the physical loss of property or the physical loss of the infrastructure. That gets added on top. So there are other things, but it showed us that, hey, we can actually do this. We can put a process in place that allows us to look at the impact of hazard events on our infrastructure, on our communities, and then out into the economy. And where we'd like to go from there is to really bring in some of those other loss modelling and also start to think about social and cultural impacts as well. So where we got to with that was to say, hey, we haven't done a business case with this. We've set up a process, but we've looked at some impacts. Now, the next step would be to say, well, what can we do about it? You know, what might some mitigations be? And here there's a list of mitigations. If it's flooding, there might be flood protection works that we can do. We might be able to lift some critical infrastructure above the danger zone. We might be able to shift some things. We might be able to strengthen bridges. We might be able to add diversity. There's a number of different things that could be done. That's the step where, you know, we need to sit with the Lifelines community. So what is it that you could do? What might be business as usual? What might be capital improvements or whatever? And then look to justify that intervention. So that kind of leads us, you know, into what would be the next step. Is that if we can do that, we can then look at the effect of the hazard after intervention, rerun the economic ruler, and test for the cost benefit of doing something. So that's overall the process. We took that to a public evening at the University of Canterbury, set up a poster to show what it was about, and there was quite a good interest in that, you know, in the outcome of this work. And you know, I think it's interesting work. It's good work that New Zealand probably could be doing more of, and would certainly like to be part of that. There are some reports. I think I put the link into the KEG report there. There's a lot of information that we produced as we sort of stepped our way through to the end point of that report. So certainly, if you're interested in that, by all means, you know, go and check it out. Moving from the work we've done to what we've now got underway, the two projects being supported here by NEMA. The first is South Island Priority Routes. That is looking from an AF8 point of view at the roading network across the South Island. So not just state highways, but all the council local roads networks as well. And we wanted to see how our road networks connect up with priority sites, you know, community sites, emergency services sites, hospitals, lifeline sites as well, such as water pumping stations, whatever it might be. So what is the layering of our road network with our different sites, critical and community sites? And when we understand that, we can then look at the impacts of the Alpine Fault event on our road network. University of Auckland is doing some work modelling the vulnerability of roads to landslides, to liquefaction across the entire South Island. So we'll be able to see what's it going to look like after an AFA event, and understanding then what those sites are and their importance, what might be the places that we might want to try and intervene first in terms of restoration. There's another thing that we can do too, which is it would help you know, show the way to where you might need to do some strengthening of road infrastructure or some mitigations in advance. So it's a bit of a readiness and production piece as well. So that's priority sites, priority routes. Yeah, there's a lot of fine print there, but essentially the blue bar across the bottom is saying the sites, road vulnerability, which is Liam's piece of work. We have some workshops coming up in March next year. We will go around to all of the regions, and we've got Martin here behind me who's helping with this, and meet with the regions, show them the maps, show them the vulnerability work that Liam has done, and start to sort of see what that might look like in terms of priorities, and then collate and moderate that across the island. And particularly, as I said, in response to respective AFA. So that's priority routes in a bit of a nutshell. We have a GIS application for that, which is being used to actually capture and record all of that information, and will be increasingly used, obviously. The second project is an extension of the one I spoke of earlier. So we did the North Canterbury pilot. Now this piece looks to the wider region, and it brings in some of the sectors that we didn't actually look at in the earlier work. So particularly ports, fuel, and obviously it's a wider regional piece of work. So we're very interested. We're just reaching out now and talking to utilities about the data. So obviously councils and your water networks and your roading networks are a critical part of that. We're combining the search for data with the two projects, so we do it efficiently. And you know, it might be that we actually get enough information from this, particularly from the national utilities, to look wider than Canterbury, to look across our borders, and perhaps be able to help out there as well. And what I want to do is to deepen that maturity assessment and bring in more than just the economic modelling to start to look at social and cultural impacts and also the loss modelling. Again, we're working with the urban intelligence people. We've just had a meeting today to finalise the engagement there, where they'll do that visualisation piece, draw in, the academic work around fragility, relationships, vulnerability into the models and establish the models. And certainly we had a lot of interest from some of the agencies, Main Power and Transpower and Enable, with the work that we did before in North Canterbury. So we're looking at expanding that obviously out into the other regional entities as well. And the end point of this will be, we'll have an explorer, we'll have the data there, and it'll be available for folks and councils or other utilities to actually go in and look at the impact on their own networks. Again, we'll have workshops that will bring everyone together to sort of show the tools to them and how they can make the best use of them. And with the merit, I'm hoping too that we'll be able to bring in the farm impact module as well. So there's a bit happening there. We're cracking on. That's the list of the lifelines that we're hoping to engage with or are engaging with there, starting right at the top with electricity, right through generation. And you can kind of see that, the wide list that's there. And we are actually picking up down near the bottom there, as you'll see, solid waste, flood protection schemes, which are important to us and are a lifeline, and irrigation networks, which is important here in Canterbury, and fast-moving consumer goods. And I might add that the term lifelines, as you probably gathered, is changing to critical infrastructure. So the next time I'm here, I may have a different name. that is what's happening. So that's again our program across the bottom. We're just into the engagement phase at the moment. Impacts models will be being developed, and then we'll do our analysis workshops again, probably around that April time next year, and finalise the analysis. Just a couple of quick slides. I mean, these are just a couple of hotspots. When we look at the AFH shaking map, and we look for anything that's greater than 7, which is the orange, it starts to tell us that liquefaction can come in. So that's just a little part of North Canterbury there, that coastal area which is kind of vulnerable to shaking, and then also around the coast of the port of Timaru there, so that area also. So these are the areas, some of the areas that we want to just have a bit of a closer look at when we do the vulnerability work. And look, I think that's the slide. So a quick rattle through of what we've done and what we're doing at the moment, and certainly interested in how, from a governor's point of view, you would like to be either involved or give us even a sense of direction to take back to Lifelines, the things that you would like to see come out of this.
Thanks, Mark, for the presentation. Yeah, no, it was me that did it. That pushed it a bit early. But yeah, thanks for your presentation. It's good. Let's look at the flood one and 1 in 500 flooding, and so everything was covered of water. So yeah, it's a slash my wrist now or later. Oh, okay, there was a naught. I saw the 0.2. Yeah, push your button.
Yeah, that was 0 to 0.2, or 0.3 something, Mr. Chair. But you're right, very observant that you picked that out. The Waimakere area was looking at a truckle wet, and I guess that's a feature of the fact it was a very flat plain. The river comes out, and you're going to get overland flooding and flow across a wide area, potentially.
Just another way of putting 1 in 500. Put them as a cumics in the Whakamutunga River. How many in the river if it was a 1 in 500?
I can get this light to stay on for a minute. You could, but I don't know what the number is. That actually wasn't the Waimakere breakout. It was the Ashley breakout. But you could. I don't know what the numbers are, but the flooding folks upstairs are very good at that. And you can actually also model through their application flood velocity. So what's the velocity of the water? Because that's important too if you're thinking about scour and impact on bridges and that sort of thing.
Thank you for that. And I was going to ask the question, where does flood infrastructure sit within critical infrastructure, and the rebranding or the renaming of Lifelines, and we've obviously at Environment Canterbury put a very strong view forward to government within the consultation period that I think our flood protection is critical to the infrastructure. So I'm pleased to see that you you've got that there, because it is a challenge. And I remember looking at the preamble to some of those reports that come out of Gabrielle, and it says, well, big storm, heaps of rain, flooding, and then we talk about the impact upon the city or the people, but we've missed out the piece in between, and there was no real conversation about how do we mitigate, how do we improve our rivers, our flows, or whatever, to try and reduce some of that impact. We sort of jumped straight from event to what happens to the person on the street. So I'm really pleased that you've got that in there, and I guess advocating for those flood infrastructures as part of the problem that we're all doing.
Yeah, yeah, I'd be happy to come along. I don't think I actually got to the last one, but I'd love to be able to come along again. Yeah, no, that's good. One of the interesting thing I found when we had Callum, I think, from the flood group, and we said, well, look, what if we kind of strengthen and do a bit more with holding that water in? And of course, what happens then is that the water's more water going faster under your bridge, and your bridge is only a finite waterway, so your risk level goes up your bridge. So there's quids and quid pro quo and what have you, but no, certainly. And although I've got AF8 map up here, the Explorer will have the flooding maps in it as well, so you can overlay and look at that. And we'll have the tsunami, and in fact, all hazards that can be geospatial can be put up. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm able, I come from a little place called Kokorarata on the Banks Peninsula, and I don't see how some of that modelling can fit into a rural area. And especially, and we do have flooding over there, believe it or not. The whole of Banks Peninsula does have flooding. But how does your model, would it fit into that rural area?
Look, even though that's a regional model, you can make it as fine and as localised as you want, as long as you've got some information around hazard and what you've got in that area. And it might be marine or buildings or infrastructure. And, as long as you know where that is geospatially, you can overlay it, we can certainly look at the impact. We're not going to be able to look at every little thing as part of this, but the tool, and the process is there that anybody could pick it up and take it further. And we'll try and put another piece in next year, Rachel, just looking under here, to sort of even develop more of the business case process. I think we can sort of see the evolution, the way that this could go. Yeah.
The point I'm making, I think this is valuable, but for a place like the Banks Peninsula, I was just asking if some of this model could fit into there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the work. It's great to see. I'm wondering how it informs other decisions. So we're about to have a regional transport committee meeting next. How does this fit into thinking about the risk priority of our bridges across Canterbury from a transport point of view? Like, that's kind of something that I think we need to be looking at. Have you already had discussions with Whakamutunga and what this could be for them? And
short answer, yes. Whakamutunga are involved, certainly involved in the priority routes. I might add that 20 odd years ago, a different hat, I used to be part of the Regional Land Transport Committee advising them as part of this. So we are in contact also with the RTC people. We gave a presentation to one of the South Island Regional Transport chairs a little while ago. So definitely it's part of it, both projects. And, we're not at the stage of being able to identify priorities, but I would think that when there are results, they should inform priorities. So it might be whether it's the Ashburton Bridge or duplicating some other bridges elsewhere to avoid some of the one-lane bottlenecks you get when one's closed, that they may be priorities, for resilience as much as anything else. And we'd like to see, what we do helping with that. Yeah. Does that help? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does help. And I mean, Karakia Bridge was closed on the weekend because of tractor crashed into it. It wasn't a flood event; it was just an accident. The thousands of people inconvenienced. The next piece of provocation for us around how does this fit in with the first report of this meeting and the things that we would implement because of what New Zealand learnt through Gabrielle and where our risk infrastructure sits currently, and how critical communications were when they were unavailable, became noticeable when they were unavailable in the Gabrielle sense. How does that fit in with what we have done since for generator capacity to keep cell towers open and that sort of thing?
Good question. And I think there's probably not a lot of immediate outcomes around Gabrielle, but certainly, Canterbury has a very strong Lifelines utility coordination group that Mark sort of leads. They are currently doing a review right now, actually, out at Rolleston on the windstorm that we just had. And of course, we lost a lot of telecommunications at that. So they're looking at, what were the causes, what were the issues with those telecom providers and the power companies. So yes, we do follow up with when we have events. As far as the KPMG report, I did interview Mark and his team. So there is some sort of Lifeline influences in there, but there wasn't anything specifically about Lifelines. Yeah.
Sam, the next meeting starting in an hour's time, you might want to bring up at the road transport this exact, keep it fresh there. John.
Yeah, I guess a continuation of Sam's question. We talk about priority highways in this State Highway 1, and I know we've been part of conversations where Whakamutunga State Highway 1 that's what it is, and subsidiary, and how do we get from Ashburton up to the top or whatever if things go wrong. So have we expanded our thinking about priority kind of roading? Because if we lose the road to Kaikoura, which could happen any day of the week, what is the priority of the inland road, or what is the priority of going over the Lewis and down? So there's one thing to have a priority road, but what is our backup? What are our subsidiaries sitting in there, given we don't have too many options in the South Island for bypasses?
No, we don't have too many options, actually. And I mean, the priorities, it's not just the highest, it will actually go down through, right down to the lowest. And if we find that, there's a highway that's going to be badly damaged by the AFO, well, we know there's going to be, what is the alternative route that might actually be less damaged that we could actually invest in either now or when it comes to time to restore? So it will look at that level of granularity. Yeah.
Good. No further questions? Recommendation there. Thank you, Mark, for your report. That we received the Canterbury Lifeline Utility Coordination Group report. Someone like to move? Sam and Nigel. Those in favour, please say aye. Carried, thank you. 8.6, the 2021 flood recovery update. Page 102. And Richard.
Kia ora koutou. It's very timely that we're talking about lessons learned because these are our own lessons learned from 2021, and it highlights how long it actually takes and how complicated it can be before we start to get results. And I'm really pleased in this report that the collaborative process that we've adopted, and it's not just the group office, but it is the wider group, including the districts working together. We're now starting to get some really good results. And key things I want to highlight, we now have a roading network map. There's still some work to do around that, around quality control and so on, but that's definitely a milestone. And the roles and responsibilities for the rural group, that's going to a RAG meeting on Thursday, and Phil and the team have done some great work on that. But in particular, in the impact and needs assessment, there's been some work done around that in terms of enhancing processes so that it's now, we've got electronic systems for doing it, so we don't need to revert and reinvent the wheel every time. We can aggregate data up, we can task it through D4H, and that piece of work is largely complete now. It's been rolled out across all the districts, and that's really cutting edge for New Zealand. It's something that a number of jurisdictions and even nationally have been working away at for a long time and have not managed to crack, and we have, and we're very proud of it. So just a hats off to the team who have been working on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Questions, Richard? John?
So having cracked that nut, is that something that will be transferred into the national space and go, here it is, it works, or will we be sitting at an island with some magnificent technology, but not? That's, I guess, my question.
Absolutely, we're sharing it, and in the South Island in particular, where most of our surrounding regions use D4H, because that's a key part of being able to task that for social impact, social needs. And Auckland is also adopting D4H, I understand, so that will actually be, I think, really useful for them. The survey component is probably also useful across the country. It's that tasking component and the automation of that process that is probably the real step ahead. And in that regard, the dealing with the privacy impacts has been a really critical component of it. Whereas previously what's tended to happen is the data has been difficult to collect, and it's often been done in paper form, and then you've got the data entry, but then sharing it often meant emailing spreadsheets of sensitive information around, and that's a very dangerous place to be in terms of Privacy Act, and also the disposal of that data is another component of it.
So I guess the follow-up is, C10, and when we shift staff around all over the country, to have a common operating platform in that space would be really useful, so that anyone stepping in has the knowledge, and you just pick it up and away you go. So if it can be rolled out into a national scheme, then that would be brilliant.
Yes, and we are already sharing it, certainly with the South Island counterparts, and engaging with the North Island.
I think there's a few things around being raised here. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the work that Richard's done in this project. He sort of picked it up as a contractor to start with, and then once he came on as our recovery manager, kept it going. And he's right. We're pretty proud of the fact that we've achieved both the roading process and this needs assessment process. I think from a national point of view, it'd be very hard to put some of these systems in nationally. There's 16 CDM groups, they don't use the same systems, so at the moment we can't do that. However, CDM groups that are using D4H, we've shown this to them, particularly the needs assessment one, and they're beginning to adopt them. The key piece that makes it work is a little wee piece of software that sits between ArcGIS and D4H. That's the bit that we're sort of giving away, because that's the bit that makes it work. John, in regards to common operating picture, I think nationally we're a long way off that. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things that between our own funding, government funding, and a very dispersed way of working, it's going to take time. But what we're finding here in the South Island with the AF8 program is that we are getting a bit of a picture in the South Island. It might seem really, really simple, but we're about to be able to, across the South Island on GIS, be able to see states of emergency, so declarations and EOCs that are functioning, welfare centres or civil defence centres that have been set up. That's a very, very simple stuff. But from a South Island perspective, we're about to see that on one view, hopefully in the next sort of 4 to 6 months. And that's the starting point to take into account, the work that Mark's already talked about, having that in a South Island view, the welfare needs assessment in a South Island view. It's going to be a much more achievable thing from a South Island perspective. I just wonder, I'll make the offer. I don't know if as governance you want to see these tools, but for a joint committee we could bring along and just quickly give you it would end up being a 15 to 20 minute presentation to see what these tools do and just the very basics of how they operate. It is operational, I understand that, but if you were keen to see it and understand it so that you can then support those conversations when you're working with other colleagues and counterparts, then
Not around the table, so I think.
yeah, we could look at bringing it. I don't know if the February meeting will be too soon, but we could certainly bring it to you.
My thoughts are that we've got these systems that are working really well for the South Island, and others are picking them up in different sort of places within the North Island. I just have this fear that someone will come up with a bright idea and then we'll say that's a bloody good idea and we will change the whole thing. So I guess my question, and then Rochelle and others going, how do we actually nationalise some of these things as best we can, and in the hope that someone doesn't have a bright idea that says we're now going to do it this way.
Yeah, absolutely good question, John. We're certainly keeping NEMA and the other group managers informed in the work we're doing, so they know there is always the risk that a new national system or a new bright idea will trump it. That's a risk, but we can't wait for one of those systems to come in place. We'll be caught with our pants down, if I can say that, during an emergency, and we don't want to be like that. So we'll put these systems in place. We'll share them. If in the future we get trumped by something else, so be it. But at the moment, I think we're leading.
So Craig or Ian, if you've got questions, just put your little handy thing up if you need to, if you have any. Right. We see you there. Point number 16 around the lifestyle blocks and no support for them, and we experienced that in the 21 floods. I think Selwyn and probably all the Canterbury did. It's still an issue, but it says in there that requires resolution at national level. Is someone doing that?
It's certainly been raised. MPI and others are aware of it. Actually getting traction for them to do something with it seems to be very difficult.
So do we need to do something around this table to do something? Do you need help from us? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, if you're able to advocate for it, yes, it would be useful. I think at the officer level, I don't think progress has been made.
Should we send a letter to from group governance suggesting something happens? Yeah. Murray.
If I may, yes, I think that's a really good idea, because this isn't just the only example. I know in our district we've had example even with significant and severe drought, flood events, earthquake. The lifestyle blocks do seem to have there's a piece missing in the jigsaw. So
it'd go to the Minister of MPI. What do they call that? Is that it? Yeah. We need a resolution to that, or? But cool.
I suppose, can I comment? I mean, one of the challenges that we have in this space, and this might be what a letter has to address, is MPI will only support farms that are production farms, and there's a percentage that they use to describe that. It's got to be a certain percentage of the owner's income to be eligible to get MPI support. It's probably in that, I'd describe it as being in that wicked problem area, because they're not production farms, they're still rural, and they're in sort of no man's land as to who takes responsibility for them. There is a council responsibility. There probably is other government responsibilities. We can write a letter. I'm not convinced it'll go very far, if I can say it here like that.
Yeah. Oh, I certainly support that. We have been raising that on many occasions in every forum. We raised it at our council when you came the other day. We've raised it with the Prime Minister when she was down there in Ashburton, and we should continue to keep raising it, because it's just not fair, and it's a gap where MPI can respond and are able to respond, but there's a gap there, and there's significant lifestyles around. So, and they are at significant risk. So, I would support us writing to the Minister and seeking that it be considered.
Yeah, they need to be looked at from somewhere. If it's not MPI, it might be MSD or SIPS or whoever. Someone needs to look after them when in times of crisis. So someone needs to do something. The letter will be good. Nigel.
Yeah, I agree in times of crisis, but there's also a third responsibility. It's called personal responsibility, and they've chosen to live in these places sometimes, and perhaps the resolution should be to turn them back into farms. That would be the entire way. Makariri, you lose half your population, yeah, Dan.
It's probably worth noting in there, just let me check if Rick had it in here. Yes, point 15, where we're working on a lifestyle block handbook. So there's been a Wellington version of it, a Southland version of it, Auckland version of it, and we are making some adjustments based on the hazards that we face, so different from the North Island. And then, once we've got that handbook, promoting it as strongly as we can to those lifestyle blocks. That's exactly what you're leading to, Nigel, of you've got to be self-sufficient. You've got to be able to look after yourself while you're on these properties. So, that might go some of the way, but it's going to require effort from us and probably MPI and other people to promote it.
No disrespect to Nigel, to the learned mayor of Timaruba, it's not as simple as he suggests. And I don't want to get into a debate now, but we just, there are, our district, there was a number of them in the country that was listed where there has been that growth. There's a risk. They can't get insurance for it because you're not able to get insurance cover. So all we're asking is that they're considered. From an MPI perspective, there's significant resource that comes to farmers, and rightly so. Just asking for some equal consideration to be given.
And some of that agree around rural support trust, whether you've got 2 acres or 200 acres or 2,000. If your sheep are skinny, hungry and dying, it's affecting the farmer as much as 2 acres or 2,000. He doesn't like, or she doesn't like seeing them in that condition and can affect them up there. So they need assistance. Everyone needs the ability to have it, I think.
Totally agree. And I'm just drawing on item number 16, and actually if the advocacy was around, currently in times of despair, rural support trusts are actually picking up outside of their mandate. If the advocacy is around supporting rural support trusts to enable support in times of stress, we will have done the right thing.
So, James, if you or someone could craft a letter and probably just circulate it first, and then we'll endorse it and send it off to the appropriate minister or ministers, whoever they may be at this stage. So we do have a recommendation there, which is that we received the report at number 2 that notes the milestones achieved for the impact and needs assessment group and the rating group. So I'd like to move on a second for that. Murray and Nigel, discussion. Not put the motion, all in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Over the page to the emergency management financial report. James.
Just want to, the report's there to show you the current finances. I just wanted to highlight the reserve is sitting at just under 100,000, sorry, just under $1 million. Some of that, depending on how we spend money this year, some of that might be paid for by reserve, as we've previously talked about. But overall, the finances are in line with the budget. There's just a little bit of surplus at the moment. But there are some variations due to Cyclone Hale, which is the first cyclone that hit Auckland, due to some welfare experiences we incurred, and the Lifeline's work that Mark's already talked about, both of which get recovered from either NEMA or the NEMA resilience funding. So they will certainly even out through the rest of the year. But happy to take any questions on the current budget if there are any.
Well, I think, Sam, you raised a question a couple of meetings ago about getting lifting the level higher. Where are we at with that? Are we addressing that in the LTP, or we just gradually get there, or do we need to?
Hasn't been addressed in this LTP, and I think it comes into that bigger conversation about the review and where we go with future funding. So not addressed yet.
So when would it be addressed? And like, if not now, before an LTP, when would we say it should be higher? I just kind of feel like there's like that money will just disappear super quick as soon as there's an event, and why have any money if it's not actually going to be, like, we want it to cover 10% of the costs or 50% of the costs, or 2% of the cost. Should we agree what we think? And if you could ballpark put us in, and then think about what sort of contingency we want, and then work our way towards it over 10 years, it's again, it's money. It's not a very nice discussion when we're all talking rates increases, but preparedness for an event. I think it's on us to be prepared ahead of time rather than always just hoping that someone will come to the party afterwards.
I think the conversation that Richard's already started having with some of you around the funding for recovery is going to feed into this. So as Richard goes through the development of his recovery plan, that'll be raised in there. I think too, yes, there's the question of the reserve. There's also we've got to acknowledge that Environment Canterbury holds a very large drawdown to help fund events when they occur, and I've done no analysis on what a balance would look like. Certainly asked for some people from Environment Canterbury to help me with that analysis, but I've not done yet.
Further questions on the financial report? If not, there's a motion there that we receive the 23-24 first quarter civil defence emergency management group financial report. Nigel and Dan, all in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Group controllers report 8.8, page 109. Thanks.
I was going to go through this by line item, but I'll just raise a few points here. In the recovery updates, Richard's now been to 9 out of 10 councils, so he's been getting through all the councils around the recovery plan, so early in the new year, a new draft, which Richard here will be drafted up and will come out. He's received some very good feedback from some of those council meetings, so thank you for making time to be able to see Richard with those. And for all councils actually taking it to councils rather than another committee or a smaller grouping. Just to note there, Pandora, we've been going through exercise Pandora, our annual EOC exercising. We're almost completed with that process now. We've got the ECC in a week's time, and then there's a few councils that will opt to do that later on, just based on Ashburton's waiting for the new EOC to be built, and so forth. Next year, I haven't got it in the notes here, but next year this will tie into exercise Rūwhenua that Rochelle's already talked about, a national exercise. Our key part will be in sort of March, April, May next year to sort of get some key, or to use the exercise to develop some key problems that Canterbury will push up into NEMA, for NEMA and National to think about. Now, just on tsunami resilience, over the last 4 months in partnership with the University of Canterbury, we've been developing a bit of a workshop that we can deliver to council staff to better understand the impact of tsunami. Most of our work in the tsunami space has been about evacuations and getting people out. There's been very little work around what it will look like after it's arrived and after it's damaged infrastructure and housing and roads, etc. So this is a workshop that allows us to have that conversation in each council that want it, and with partner agencies. So that's something that's almost ready to come out, and certainly through your EMOs, you should start to see that next year. Prior to COVID-19 sort of impacting on all the work cycles that we have in New Zealand for CDM, there used to be a national conference and a South Island conference in alternate years. So the South Island group managers made a request for me to look at, and then I've agreed to it. And I thought it was a very clever thing to do, to be honest, but to run a South Island CDM conference here at Te Pai next year. We're just going through the process of finding out the funding, how much it's going to cost, whether we can make it break even, because if we can't break even, we're not going to do it, and run a South Island conference next year. And certainly if we do, I would look to some of governments to come and actually address parts of it. So if there's anything you particularly would like to speak about, there'll be an opportunity. A cost of emergencies, this picks up some of the work that Mark's also already talked about. And if you remember, after the 2021 flooding, there was a request by the KEG to look at whether we could sort of develop a better costing model for flooding. That's now been done. The spreadsheets is the most amazing spreadsheet I've ever seen. But I will look to bring back next year, probably in February, a summary of the tool just so you can see what it can do. But basically, next time it floods, we can put in some parameters and we can get sort of the minimum amount it's likely to have cost to the highest amount it's going to cost. Bill submission, I won't go over that. It's gone through. Thank you for your support and reading that out of session and making comments, or your councils. Just want to acknowledge, and Bede is online, I want to acknowledge that Bede stood down from the chair of the coordinating executive group at our last meeting earlier in the month, or late last month. We gave Bede a wee gift of a manaya carving in Panamu to thank him for the work he's done. And Will Doherty, Chief Executive Kaikoura District Council, was elected as the new KEG Chair, and Sharon Mason, Chief Executive Selwyn District Council, as the Deputy Chair. So we'll see that change come into effect at the next KEG meeting. But Bede, I know you're online. Thank you very much for the work that you did in chairing the KEG and the support that you've given CDM since about I think I worked it out that you started in late 2020 as the chair.
Thank you, James.
I'll just follow on from that too, Bede. It's your last meeting here today before you move on to your new adventures. So thank you for the years of dedication and support you've given to the chair, me and previous in the offices. You've given good direction, good advice, and all the best for the future. And you'll obviously watch on with interest, no doubt, to see how we progress over the next few years. If we get a disaster, if we don't, then we'll welcome Will in to fill your position. So, Pete, on behalf of the group, thank you very much for all you have done.
Thank you, Mayor Neil, for your kind words.
We will still see you about, obviously, somewhere, no doubt. It won't be strangers. So we need to receive that report, Richard. James, all right? Yeah. 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 In front of us. Who moved it? Nigel? Murray? Please, aye. Thank you. 8.9, the committee chair's report. Yeah, this is just really asking you for items for the next meeting of items of interest to raise for next meeting, emerging issues if there is any from the members. So if you have any, now is the time to raise them if you wish. Would like to say.
It's not really a big issue for an agenda item. It's really about the way our papers are all circulated and getting updates via email, in bit piece. And for the Mural Forum, moving to having some document handling software and using Board Pro is just much easier. When there's updates, your board papers just update. We've got the Regional Transport Committee meeting next, and again, we just get different emails with different agendas kind of flying all over the place, and it'd be really helpful to have them all in the one place. And whether this group chooses Board Pro or Stellar or Diligent or some other way that your councils all do things, I just think we should be moving away from circulating these sorts of things by email. It would be helpful from a board perspective. What do you use already, Ken? And
He can obviously prepare it. And I've had discussions after you mentioned it to me, and I was going to bring it up, but we might go to the side of the tables to see if we can or can't.
We can investigate some options. However, once we send it to you, you are able to load it into your own systems. So I know there's several different systems out there that different councils use, but we'll have a look at it.
After next question.
Perhaps it's a conversation with your EAs as to whether they can load it. I know mine loads mine onto a Stellar. Yeah. You're just thinking of simplicity. Yeah. The the Mayoral Forum comes already done, I think, in Board Pro, and that comes out of the building. So yeah, that happens. I've no idea and don't want to either, but governance. Yeah,
It's not understanding.
different team. They'll work on it. They'll work on it. They'll figure it.
We'll sort it.
Perfect, thank you. I'll move that we receive the chair's report. Second it. Mary, all in favour, please say aye. Carried. Next item is the supplementary papers, 8.10. Yeah.
Apologies for sending this one out late. There's obviously the agreement, but there to include this. Perhaps we can do it all at the same time, Neil. But yeah, there's controller appointments here for Stephen Dora and Grant Finlinson in Timaru District Council. So just increasing their pool of local controllers, and then Paul Cooper as a local recovery manager for Timaru District Council as well. Just noting Paul is also a controller as well. And that Paul Daly from Waimakariri is no longer a local controller. But the sort of quick resume CVs of each of those people is included. Yeah, and the KEG has recommended that you accept them.
I've got to blame you, James. You jumped the gun. We need to receive those reports first. So I'd like to move that we receive the following report to be considered at the CDM Group Joint Committee on today. Councillor and Recovery Management appointments. Move it. Mary, second it. Dan. All in favour, please say aye. And then the next item, 8.11. Appoints the following as local controllers for Canterbury. Stephen Duran and Grant Finlinson. Appoints Paul Cooper as local recovery manager for Timaru District Council, and notes that Peter Daly from Waimakariri is no longer a controller. So I'd like to move and see John, Nigel, all in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Thank you. So that takes us, I think we've just about done everything we need to do. Next meeting will be February the 22nd, 24 at 2 p.m. Here. Closing Karakia would
Ai, anō?
Aye.
Tēnā koutou katoa, nei rā te mihi kia koutou katoa, e te mārei kura, e Auntie Elizabeth, tēnei te mihi kia koe, i ngā kura matua, me rangatira, tēnā koutou, whakakapi tō tātou hui e karakia tēnei. Unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātea, kia mama, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua e te ara takata, koira e rongo whakairia ake ki runga, kia tīna, uie, tēnā koutou.
Thank you.